I will be your presenter. I want to thank Jill Tiefel for being our host and Dave Cornelius for being our facilitator today. So an equitable multi-level system of supports, not a new graphic. We want to make sure that you understand that all of the work that we do is part of this graphic. Today for our session, we've chosen to really highlight that continuum of supports that you see on that gold band right in the middle. That continuum of supports is vital. Any process or intervention that you provide in an intensive, individualized way should be part of this systemic and systematic continuum. We also want to make sure that we keep equity at the center of all that we do. You will see that it is in the center of that framework graphic. And when you see this little symbol pop up on your slides, that will be an indicator that the information on those slides specifically ties to the concept of equity. We also want you to know that as a data-driven center, our sessions are all aligned to our system assessments. And this session, there are 4 line items in Tier 3 that our content will directly connect to. And I want to let you know that whether or not you have been trained by us in Tier 3, this Tier 3 portion of the TFI is available to you and will really help you as you strengthen your systems and the supports that you provide our students and families that need that support the most. What we want you to leave with today are outcomes. We want to make sure that you understand best practices for individual students that have intensive needs. And we want you to be able to begin applying some of those best practices to the individual support plans that you already have in place or that come up in the future. We also want to make sure that you have some really good grounding in ways that you can see what we're learning and talking about at Tier 3 best practices, applying, looking back to Tier 1 and Tier 2. You will have opportunities to strengthen Tier 1 and Tier 2 so that your Tier 3 work doesn't feel like it's living in a vacuum. Which of the following has been part of your experience with Tier 3? Before we dig any further into best practices at Tier 3, we would not be doing our job if we didn't show the triangle, right? But we want to point out some really specific things on that triangle as we think about implementation at Tier 3. Here's the first one. Tier 3 is not meant to be a replacement for anything at Tier 1 or Tier 2. It is in addition to, not in replacement of. Now, as you move up that triangle from Tier 1 to Tier 2 to Tier 3, things get more intensive. It takes a strong continuum to be able to support students at that top tier. It takes more behavioral expertise to implement things at Tier 3. It takes greater coaching for those that are implementing because the work is hard. It takes a higher degree of district planning and support because that's where that time, that precious resource of time, is going to come in. So we also want to make sure that the lower level tiers are meeting the needs of adequate numbers of students so that the precious resources that it takes to fully implement strong Tier 3 have been reserved. For instance, if you have 15% of students that you have identified through your data rules as having Tier 3 needs, it is vital that you go back and look at Tier 1 and Tier 2 and planfully address the ways that those lower level tiers can meet the needs of more students. Of course, we're going to support the students that need to be supported in real time, but we also want to be very real in telling you that that Tier 3 individualized type of supports, we have a lot of false positives in our data when Tier 1 and Tier 2 are not functioning as they should be. The other thing that we need to keep track of, not just our percentages overall, but at each tier, it's vital that your team looks at and disaggregates data as well. If you're seeing that your tier 1 data is overrepresenting any subgroup in need of a tier 2 support, go back and talk about how to make tier 1 more equitable, more culturally responsive. The same is true if you look at tier 3. If you are finding that the majority of your students that are engaged in a tier 3 individualized intensive type of support all are from a subgroup in your building, that's an indicator. We're not going to stop providing supports, but we want to look at the way our system is supporting all students equitably.
On the side button.
This continuum of supports relies on teaming structures, on data, on evidence-based practices at each tier and between each tier. Each tier requires specific conversations about the fidelity of implementation, a plan for training and supporting full staff, and data rules that guide layers of support. Each tier also requires identification of what the supports are and who's responsible for them. For example, universal supports includes instruction and feedback to all students provided by all staff. Tier 2 implementation includes identifying specific interventions like check-in, check-out, and others that are available for students at the earliest indicator of need. Facilitators of group interventions might be classroom teachers. They might be others in your school. But regardless, or in addition to that, your full staff will have roles in tier 2 implementation. And at tier 3, those processes that are designed to support individuals with the most intensive need, we should make sure that the people that are facilitating those are highly trained, that they have the expertise to do so. However, your full staff will continue to have a role in implementing specific strategies and interventions as they are part of that larger plan. Big picture, tier 3 is not about replacing tier 1 and tier 2 with something completely different. It's about layering on more intensive supports as the need is identified. That is equity. Remember, equity is at the center of our framework, and here's what it means. Educational equity means that every student has access to the resources and educational rigor that they need at the right moment in their education across race, gender, ethnicity, language, ability, sexual orientation, family background, and or family income. And folks, it starts at tier 1. So we're gonna think about a student profile within that triangle. Each student, and really each of us, have areas in our lives that we're really successful with what's provided universally. And we all have areas that we need a bit of support. Trust me, I could go into that about the ways I need individualized support and kind of some group supports. But let's look at this student. This student is quite successful in things that are pretty predictable. Relationships with adults, academic subjects of math and reading. He or she also attends regularly. Attendance is predictable. School starts at the same time every day. Now, as things become less predictable, things like peer relationship, and things get a little less structured or maybe a little more competitive, like PE class, the student benefits from a bit more support. Now, in these situations, anxiety seems to rise for this student, and sometimes that manifests itself in anger and aggression that requires intensive individualized support. It is really important to note that this student also benefits from individualized supports in language arts as an enrichment due to exceeding the benchmarks. Now, to align tier 3 work to best practice, we need to make sure we're not using this as one more opportunity to label students. Our students are not tier 1, nor are they red zone students. Students aren't on a tier. We need to make sure we're avoiding language like, Dave is a tier 2 kid, or Rachel's in the red zone, she's tier 3. Instead, we need to look at those tiers as ways to help us structure the many supports that students may need to be successful in all aspects of life. So if we need to respond to one of those type comments, a better example of a statement might be, Rachel is receiving tier 2 support for problem solving. Now we want to be able to have this cemented to your memory. And one of the best ways that we as adults learn is by applying things to our personal situation. So we're going to ask you to spend a few minutes in individual reflection and consider writing down your thoughts on the prompt that's given. You have a beautiful, hopefully you've gotten it in the mail, a beautiful journal. You can use a scrap of paper, you can use a Google document, whatever is comfortable to you. But we want you to really reflect on what areas of your life might warrant supports across or through each tier. It might be something medical, social, athletic, perhaps something completely different. Remember, you are not a tier. You're not a color on that triangle, and neither are students. We all need support at different times of our lives. Now, as we look further into best practice at tier 3, it's vital that any individualized student plan builds on lower level interventions as part of a comprehensive, effective, and efficient plan. A student could be in check in, check out, or a social emotional instructional group, or SAG, as we, acronym city, right? Or a student could have a simple FBA BIP and also be involved in an individualized intensive plan. Conversely, for a student whose education consists mainly of an individualized plan, the team, the school, the facilitators need to make sure that the student has access to lower level interventions as part of that plan. In either of those scenarios, the student should have access to remaining fully engaged in the tier 1 environment as appropriate, with access to tier 1 core instruction, with layered group and individual supports and modifications to ensure success. If a student is in special ed, that's determined by the IEP team. Our goal is always for the student to be in an environment with their peers to the greatest extent possible and to receive core instruction by those that are experts in core instruction. We can't say this too many times. Equity needs to be at the center of what we do. If you leave this conference and your biggest takeaway is having that emblazed in your brain, it will be a win. So I'm going to read that definition one more time. Educational equity means that every student has accesses to the resource and educational rigor they need at the right moment in their education across race, gender, ethnicity, language, ability, sexual orientation, family background, and/or family income. Knowing that when we create an individual plan for those students that have extensive needs in our building, it will likely include tier 2 supports. Let's take a quick look at the 6 features that are best practice of tier 2 interventions. We know that access and involvement in tier 2 interventions will only impact outcomes if those interventions are done well. So that's also a big part of tier 3, right? So those 6 features, entrance and exit criteria, progress monitoring, increase in teaching with opportunities to practice, increased homeschool communication, adult feedback, looking at the fidelity of what we, the adults, are doing. All of them are interconnected and they rely upon each other to produce improved student outcomes. Now, what's so awesome about this is that tier 2 connects with what you already have in place at tier 1, right? It builds off of the firm foundational systems, the practices, and the data that your school is using to implement at tier 1. And it gets even better because tier 3 supports build upon both those 6 features of tier 2 and the core features of tier 1, with an increase in intensity, an increase in frequency, and also with some additional individualization. So let's spend some time thinking specifically now about tier 3. Here you can see the 10 principles that guide all of our tier 3 work. As I share a little bit more about each of them, Think about how these principles are perhaps already part of your system at Tier 1 and Tier 2. I will admit, the next slide will have a lot of information. So I want you to know that a document with these 10 principles of Tier 3 that includes their definition is available for you on the app. All Tier 3 principles are based on family, voice, and choice. From engaging family all the way to the fading of that Tier 3 process, family and youth perspectives should be intentionally elicited and prioritized. All that planning includes family members' perspective, and the team strives to provide options and choices to ensure that when the plan is created, it reflects the family's values and preferences. Here's the deal. We found that we can honestly say and live, not about you, without you, families are far more likely to trust us, to engage with us, and to be fully engaged and accountable for their involvement in the planning. Now, Tier 3 processes should be team-based. We know that, but there's a little differentiation here at Tier 3. Individuals might be responsible for action steps, but the planning and decisions made by the team should always include the family, and others on the team should be drawn from the family's natural supports. Their natural supports are their network of interpersonal and community relationships, as well as staff members that the family knows and trusts. That might be different than your standing SST, SIT, BCT team, right? Now, the team might also need to include others by legal mandate. Sometimes that happens. Team members, which include the family, the school staff, and those natural supports, need to work together collaboratively. They share responsibility for developing a single plan, one student, one plan, rather than silos of support coming from each person or agency involved. This singular plan created by the team guides and coordinates each team member's contribution toward meeting the team's and the family's goals. To achieve those goals laid out in the Tier 3 plan, the team develops and implements an individualized or customized set of strategies. Individualization of what's happening at Tier 1 or Tier 2. And sometimes those strategies are things that take place outside of school with those natural resources. We want to make sure that those strategies, supports, and services that are unique to the youth and families' identified needs build upon and enhance the strengths and assets of the youth and family, their community, and their team members. That one alone, if you can make sure that you are formally mentioning the strengths of the family, the strengths of the youth every time you get together, can have an immediate impact on outcomes. It's also important that the Tier 3 team implements service and support strategies that are community-based, that take place in the most inclusive, most responsive, most accessible, and least restrictive setting possible, and that safely promote youth and family integration into home and community life. The team ties these goals and strategies that are in the Tier 3 plan to observable or measurable indicators of success. The team monitors in terms of these indicators or outcomes and revises the plan accordingly. Throughout the entire Tier 3 process, it's vital that the process demonstrates respect for and builds upon the values, preferences, beliefs, culture of the family and the youth and their community. As Tier 3 processes have the family and youth at the heart of all that they do, we're not really doing Tier 3 unless we are culturally responsive. It's also really important to note that family or youth cannot flunk out of Tier 3. We provide unconditional care, no shame, no blame, and we're not going to give up on our kids or on the families. We're going to keep working. We're going to persist working toward those goals that the youth and family have identified until the team reaches an agreement that a formal Tier 3 process is no longer required. Okay, deep breath. That's a lot, right? Again, there is a document with these 10 principles and their definitions in the chat box and also on the app. So you don't have to memorize all these words that I have just been kind of doing this with you about. We're gonna have another moment for reflection. I'd like you to think about those 10 principles. Which of those do you consider a strength? Personally, in your school, supported by your district? Think about tier 3. Strengths at tier 3, and then take that a little further and think about if that's also a strength at your tier 2 work or your tier 1 work. You might also have noticed that you have some opportunity for growth at any of those tiers as you think about adhering to those 10 principles in the work that is ongoing in your building with students and families. So we started off this session mentioning that our main focus would be on that key feature within an equitable multi-level system of support of continuum of supports, right? We also know that that continuum won't be successful without many of those others, in fact, probably all of them, those other key features. So we're going to dig into best practices within a continuum of support aligned specifically to family and community engagement, collaboration, and strong shared leadership. And you're probably already making some connections there from some of the things in that conversation we had about 10 principles. So let's talk about teaming first. We know that collaboration and strong shared leadership go hand in hand as we think about best practice for teaming. Each and every student who has a tier 3 plan should have a team that is unique to him or her. This team should always blend the family's hopes, dreams, and natural supports with school folks that the family is comfortable with and that know the child or youth best in this school setting. It should be facilitated by someone skilled in bringing the team together and blending those perspectives. Now, there's not really a set frequency that we can give you for those team meetings, but it's probably no surprise that the more intensive the identified need, the more intensive those meetings are likely to be. So the team initially is going to engage the family, get all kinds of information, and then create a plan. The team will need to continue coming back together after that plan is developed to review, to monitor and revise the plan as needed. And then we can't leave out the huge celebration as life begins to get better for the youth, the child, and the family. So we're going to dig even deeper into best practices around teaming. Dave and I are going to share both a positive example and a non-example of a team meeting. As we recommend at tier 1, we're going to start with the non-example, so that's not what gets stuck in your head. Dave and I are going to model a kind of satirical, exaggerated non-example. The scripts that we've written for this are loosely based off of a series of YouTube videos. You might recognize it. It might seem kind of familiar because we've used some of those YouTube videos at various points in our training through the years, especially tier 2. We really hope that our feeble attempt at humor is evident and that we're not being directly saying this is what we see when we're in schools, because that's not it at all. As you are listening to this, please take some notes on some missed opportunities to adhere to the 10 principles, ways that we went off track with this meeting. Dave, are you ready?
I sure am.
All right, here we go. I think I'm actually going to turn my, hi everybody, I know that wasn't on initially, but I'm going to turn my video off and I'll turn it back on when it's time to discuss this. Okay. Oh, good afternoon. We need to discuss how Rachy is doing in school.
Yes, let's discuss Rachy.
Let's make sure we discuss her for 45 minutes so that we don't have time to discuss any other students.
Do we have an agenda?
Oh, heavens no. We'll just discuss Rachy until we run out of time. That is the sign of an effective meeting.
Agreed. Do we have all the team members here to discuss Rachy?
Well, we do not. Her parents are busy. They can't be here.
Would parents be important to have at this meeting?
Probably. Well, let's get started.
What about grandma? Parents want grandma to attend meetings when they can't.
My grandma isn't answering her phone.
Would she be an important person to have at this meeting?
Probably. Well, let's get started.
But what about the principal?
She cannot be here. She is busy scheduling other meetings.
Wouldn't she be an important person to have at this meeting?
Yeah, she could be. Well, let's get started.
What do we need to discuss regarding Rachy?
Well, she's struggling with her behavior.
What specifically about her behavior?
Yes, her behavior.
Yes.
Yeah,
How do you know she's struggling?
from her behavior.
From her behavior.
Yes.
Her behavior.
Yes.
Well, what does this behavior look like?
It's inappropriate. It's inappropriate behavior.
Inappropriate.
Yes.
What does this behavior indicate?
It indicates she's struggling with behavior.
What behavior is she struggling with?
Yep.
Do you have data about her behavior?
Yep.
Well, what is the data showing?
That she's struggling.
What is she struggling with?
Her behavior. Hey, let's put her in a special room.
Because of her behavior.
Yes, a special room.
Well, what interventions have you tried?
Oh, we've tried many, many interventions.
Such as,
Well, I asked her parents to talk to her.
did that work?
Nope.
Well, what else did you try?
I moved her seat.
You moved her seat.
Yes.
Did this help her behavior?
No, and her reading and math didn't get better either. Let's put her in special ed.
How would that help?
She wouldn't be in my room anymore.
What other interventions have you tried?
Wait, that's 2 interventions already. Are you trying to sabotage this?
No, I'm trying to use best practice. What other interventions have you tried?
Oh, I almost forgot. I also gave her PBIS.
You gave her PBIS. That is great. PBIS is best practice. What specifically did you do?
I gave her PBIS.
You gave her PBIS.
Yes. Isn't that best practice?
Well, yes. How did she receive it?
Oh, not well. Let's put her in a special room. How about the cloud room?
I'm not sure that would be best practice.
Yeah, well, let me know how that works out. Thanks for this efficient and effective meeting. We're out of time. And you guys, I get it. As a special ed teacher, I went to many, many meetings, and they weren't quite as overt in conversations. But when I went to those meetings, it often felt like that was a gatekeeper for special ed. So it's something we need to think about and really be willing to have hard conversations around and be willing to look at ways to change that. Then as we look down at that second poll, every single principle of Tier 3 could be improved upon in that scenario. You're exactly right. That's what we were going for. Hopefully it caused a few giggles and also kind of some thoughts around, while this is really extreme, there are probably some things that all of us can do to make our Tier 3 team meetings more effective and efficient. And now we're going to go to a real life example. There are schools implementing Tier 3 all around this wonderful state of Wisconsin in a way that is not at all like what you saw evidenced in that pretty extreme non-example. So we're going to share with you Rachy's story. Rachy's story was written by a Tier 3 facilitator right here in Wisconsin. Now the names, other identifying details have been changed, but we do want you to know this is real life, folks. This is real. So you'll find, I hope, you'll find Rachy's story part 1 in the chat box and that it works. If it doesn't work, you'll have to find it on the app. I don't know quite what's going on with that, so we'll see if we can get that figured out for you. It's not super long. We'll give you 3 minutes to find it and read Rachy's story, part 1. And as you read, really think about and maybe even highlight or take notes on where you see evidence of those principles that are on the screen: family voice and choice, unconditional care, teaming, and collaboration.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. Parents leading the meeting. Awesome. From Deb's strong family involvement. Yes. Having the feeling of kind of a developmental history that a social worker might do, definitely. Again, the getting to know the family and what they share really leads to that family voice and choice, them what they want to tell about their history, what their vision is, choosing what is worked on.
All right, those are some great things to notice.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to continue with Rachy's story as we think about and move into that concept of layering of supports. Ask that anything that you notice in this story that highlights the inclusion in Tier 2 supports and Tier 1 supports in the story as part of a Tier 3 plan, just put that into the chat box. And Dave will be monitoring that and we'll read off a few of those as well. So as you are reading and as you are thinking, typing in what you notice, I want to layer on another prompt that if we hadn't started a little bit late, first thing in the morning, I get it, had to have coffee, we are on board. But the additional thing I want you to think about is how are the things that you've read in Rachy's story similar or different to what's happening in your school? And just let that, write that prompt down in your journal. We're not going to have time to talk about that, but that's a biggie because that can yield action steps and conversations when you go back to your school. Dave, are you seeing anything show up in the chat box to share?
The importance of documentation, good data.
Absolutely.
Increasing family communication. And I think that's a good catch. So really the Tier 3, we may be using some of the same interventions and certainly the 6 key features of Tier 2, but what increases is the frequency and the intensity. So we take something that we might be doing twice a week at Tier 2 and we're doing it daily, whether it's social skills instruction, checking in with mentors, communication with family, and things like that. So that's a great catch.
Yep.
And fantastic comments. More opportunities for Rachy to advocate for herself, constant collaboration between schools and families, concrete data, unconditional love and support. Oh, you guys, fantastic. Yep.
Absolutely. I want to take you back to the beginning as you get ready to leave and really think about not just what are those best practices that you learned about, but what are 1 or 2 that you actually can see yourself applying when school starts. However school starts with you, it's probably different all over the state, right? And then how does this work at Tier 3 and what you've learned about Tier 3 bring to light some of those opportunities to strengthen lower tiers? Absolutely. We so appreciate you starting your day off with us.